Chappie is Neill Blomkamp's newest movie, and it's yet another showcase of his undeniable talent as a director. He really knows how to use visual effects in his movies, really cutting edge stuff, real state of the art, and seamless. He's able to use practical and CGI in such a way that you can't really tell, which is always good in a movie like this, and it really helps with the story. He also has a way of doing these great action scenes with those visual effects. Really kind of hard pounding, well choreographed kind of stuff. So it's not relying on the shaky cam kind of stuff that you see in a lot of these movies. So it really stands apart there and is able to do actually coherent action scenes, which I love and really appreciate. And he does have a visual style in and of himself, very distinct, very unique. If something can be very unique, it's kind of this cyberpunk. Ghetto style to his films. It's something very recognizable as his own. Whether it is something that he borrows styles from, that's kind of besides the point. It does feel kind of like what directors have done, like George Lucas with the original Star Wars film, with Blade Runner from Ridley Scott and Alien from Ridley Scott, giving a futuristic setting, but kind of giving this lived-in feel, this used and grimy kind of feel, which is very good because not everything should be pristine and state of the art in the future, right? So, I mean, all that stuff. I mean, he is a really talented director. But what this also is a showcase of is his undeniable flaws as a writer. Just like with his other movies, he has interesting ideas. He really does, and whether they're derivative or not, besides the point. But he has these interesting concepts. And they're able to make the story a little bit different and move it in interesting ways. But the unfortunate thing is they don't really move anywhere, which is a problem I've had now with all his movies. It's interesting for its own sake, but it doesn't really follow through and kind of leaves things hanging, and that's not good. That's a huge fault, I think, and it leaves his movies unsatisfying, and it's something that kind of keeps him from being like one of the best directors working today, I think. So he needs to tune his screenplays a little bit better, in my opinion, and Chappie is no exception to that. This is his third film after District 9 and Elysium. Already you can kind of see him up to his old tricks, going back to old ideas. Like when this movie starts, when Chappie starts, it does something similar that District 9 does, and that's kind of fusing in documentary and news footage to get some exposition out of the way, which is kind of a cheat, I think, and it's just kind of a quick way to establish, the universe of the story, which is almost unnecessary because, people will be able to pick up on that. We don't need, like, oh, John Smith of Robotics Industries thinks this is really cool. We never see this guy again. There's no importance in that again. Why show it just to establish? We're smart as audiences. Come on, we don't need that really lazy exposition. So I think he relies on that as a crutch too much. So we see this future, of course, in case, we weren't able to pick up on ourselves without that documentary footage, without Anderson Cooper telling us about it. We do see that in South Africa, which he explored in District 9, we see that the police force is now robotic, and it's growing as these robots are becoming the police force of South Africa as opposed to real people. They're harder to kill. They can follow rules, all that kind of shit. So it's kind of an interesting idea in and of itself. Not that we haven't seen that kind of stuff before. It's of course very reminiscent of something like RoboCop. Even the voices of the robots kind of sound like the RoboCop voice, like "Dead or alive, creep, you're coming with me," kind of like that. And they're not as cool as RoboCop is, but they're at least a lot cooler than the attack droids in episode 1. So there's that. They're not going around Roger, Roger, nothing like that. So that's good. But what really kind of gets the plot going is that we have some characters in this film, on different sides of things. So we have robotic engineers played by Hugh Jackman, and he's kind of the force of it all. He's kind of an ex soldier who, sees the military opportunities of these machines, and there's kind of the brains behind it, played by Dev Patel, who kind of not so much the brawn, but the brains behind these machines, and kind of the delegator of this all, the authoritative Sigourney Weaver character, who she's kind of come into that because she does have an authoritative presence to her, which I think she's used well here, even though a lot of her scenes, she's a one-noted character, but she's done well. So I think Blomkamp is able to use her presence well in this movie. So there's all that, and about, Dev Patel, he wants to enhance kind of the brain side of things, make them more sentient so that they can think for themselves instead of being controlled by, whoever controls them. And, Hugh Jackman wants to make them more, stronger or whatever. Stronger. Wants to make them stronger. Doesn't want the fun and cut. Wants to excel. So they both kind of have the same goals in mind, but, as kind of the commissioner type of character, Sigourney Weaver's like, no, not doing that. Just go and find the way it is. Blah blah blah. So there's that. But what kind of gets the plot rolling is that these fucking, just out of nowhere, I mean, in the plot, these criminals played by Die Antwoord in the movie, they get in some trouble with some drug cartel. They need, $20 million, I think. And so their idea is, let's kidnap the designer of these robots so that we can control one for ourselves, and ... profit. So, I don't know, it's kind of a stupid plot. So that's what kind of really gets it going. And so he uses a kind of a prototype, which, is sentient and learns. It begins at basically infancy and learns from whoever's teaching it, basically. So it's kind of interesting seeing, this robot that was meant for law enforcement, that was meant to, to stop criminals, being raised by criminals, and all that kind of stuff. And there's some funny stuff there. So it's an interesting concept. And, for maybe the first 40 minutes of the movie, it's kind of endearing a little bit. Has interesting ideas, things like that. But what it ultimately amounts to, just like with Blomkamp's other movies, it just kind of abandons all of its ideas for just, the big show-stopping action scene with like a big fucking robot or whatever, which he does in all his movies. It's like he's a little cautious of being too provocative, too thought-provoking, which, God forbid, right? Better to just have a big action scene at the end, so that's kind of disappointing. And like, giant robot fights we've seen so many times before, so why do we really need that? I don't think we do. And the thing about this movie, in that it's very kind of thin plot line of ideas. In science fiction, I think it's, almost irresponsible, almost unforgivable that a movie with a certain type of concept, with a certain type of idea, could completely ignore the climate in which it creates this story. So, I was left wondering certain things, like, okay, if the police force in South Africa is being replaced by robots, is there an objection to this? I mean, surely, even with people operating them, there's got to be people out of the job, right? So, I mean, wouldn't it be interesting that if, say, the police force were left with no resort but to commit the crime themselves? So, like, kind of seeing like the blurred lines between law enforcement and crime, which isn't futuristic thing. It's a real thing. So that would be kind of an interesting parallel to draw, but they don't really go anywhere there. They don't want to broaden it too much, which is unfortunate. And, this is sort of a spoiler, but almost out of nowhere, it kind of brings into play the fact that Chappie, he can download people's thoughts into a robot and create a new life out of the robot, which, some movies, like say something like with Transcendence or Short Circuit, something like that is the whole base for the whole movie. Like, how much is artificial intelligence and how much is, the soul, basically, which, this movie completely kind of ignores anything like that. It's less about, dealing with mortality and philosophy and that kind of stuff, and more just about respawning these game characters that, unfortunately, the characters in this movie become when it turns into just kind of action, shoot 'em up kind of stuff. So that's kind of disappointing when the characters feel like they're game spawns or game sprites or whatever, and they can respawn or whatever. It's disappointing. Uh, Loses that human touch, which I don't think was the intention of the movie. So yeah, there's that, and it just doesn't follow through with its ideas, and the fact that there's fucking artificial intelligence. They're just being used for the police force. What about labor and things like that? It just it puts itself in like this little bubble that it's too afraid to explore anything else, which I mean is fine. I mean, we've seen other movies do that kind of stuff, but I don't know, it's a little short-sighted of a movie, and it's not great science fiction, which I don't think Elysium was great science fiction. I don't think District 9 was great science fiction, but they're good action movies. With Chappie, though, it's a little bit harder to forgive its faults. One, because it isn't as good as District 9 or Elysium, to be honest. You can kind of see what they're going for. Like, with Elysium, I liked it, but it has its faults, and, there were plenty of people who straight up hated the movie. But one thing that had a lot of people talking was these robots in the movie. Like the army robots that Matt Damon was fighting. Those look fucking cool. So why not like base a whole movie on these robots, right? And so that's what Chappie does, but to not that great of effect, unfortunately. Again, it all just kind of comes down to the same old kind of plot that we've seen before. We've seen this kind of stuff explored in other movies to better results, even in Blomkamp's own movies, which is disappointing. The cast is good. I really like Hugh Jackman, Dev Patel, Sigourney Weaver. Always loved Sigourney Weaver. Come on. And Die Antwoord. It's not really stunt casting because they do feel like they occupy this world, so they don't feel like out of place or anything. Like Vanilla Ice showing up like Ninja Turtles and doing a rap or anything. They don't like stop and teach Chappie a rap, which maybe would have been funny. I don't know, but like they do teach him kind of things which are funny. He's like, I forget what he says. Like he's like, "Yo, hey, father muckers" or something like that. I don't know. He can't get like the slang right, which is funny. There's some good entertaining parts of this movie. It just doesn't amount to much, which is the ultimate disappointment. A lot of great ideas not followed through. It seems to be the usual kind of case with Blomkamp. I don't think we've seen the best from him just yet. At least I hope so. With such an eye for style and atmosphere and action, he really needs to tune his screenplays a little bit better so that we can have better results and better movies and more satisfying and thought-provoking stories, which is what I'd really like to see from something like Chappie, but ultimately it falls short. I'd rate Chappie 2 stars out of 4. We've seen it all before, and to much greater effect, and this is an unsatisfying and disappointing movie, ultimately, but it's still a decent time killer, I guess. So that's what I thought of Chappie. Not the worst movie, but typical kind of February, March kind of fare where, it's not so great that, we'd want to see it in like the August blockbuster season where, guns to the wall kind of thing. Because, it at least tries a little bit to be a little bit thought-provoking, but again, I feel like a broken record here, but it doesn't quite follow through. Another thing I should mention, Sharlto Copley, who's been in all of Blomkamp's movie, he plays Chappie, so I'm not sure if there's like, I didn't see any like, making of stuff in the movie, but I don't know if there's like motion capture stuff or he's just a voice, but he seems like the kind of actor. He seems like he would like act out, like what Andy Serkis kind of does with like Gollum and King Kong and Caesar, and even like with something like Johnny Depp and Rango, how he like does all the action. So Sharlto Copley, great actor. I hope to see more from him. I hope to see more from Neill Blomkamp. He is of course doing the next Alien movie. I hope it has some better ideas than what this movie has, and I hope it follows through with them better. But whatever. It's a decent time killer, I'd say. Matinee fine, Netflix fine, but not a rush out and go see it kind of movie. I know I didn't. It's in its second week now, and it's still doing okay in the box office. So I mean, it's getting the attention that it deserves, which is a minimal amount. So that'll be my review of Chappie. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to give me a thumbs up if you're so inclined to do so. Comment, let me know what you thought of Chappie. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. That'd be awesome. Until next time, I'll see you later.